Welcome to Theology Resources. Thank you for joining us. Hey, every week we bring to you a current topic in youth leadership, and this week is no different. So thank you once again. If you're new to us, you can join us on all kinds of formats. It's really simple too. If you go to our social media and go to the spotlight, all you need to do is look at the link tree, and that will take you to all of our different formats. It'll take you to our YouTube page. It'll take you to the iTunes podcast. It'll take you to all of our social media, and it will also take you to youthology.com. And at youthology.com, we have all of our archives, all of our episodes, all of the topics that we've been doing these sessions on for the last 2 years. And on top of that, a 14-year blog. So as a matter of fact, here's my commitment to you. If you go to our website at youthology.com and you search for a topic in youth leadership or youth ministry and you don't find it, all you need to do is call me, text me, or email me. All that information's on the website. Let me know, and I guarantee you, listen, I promise to you that within the next 30 days, I will cover that topic, okay? So thank you once again for joining us on this latest episode. And where we're going is, I want to bring to you two of the most asked questions as I travel in our Q&R sessions, question response sessions. And what happens in these sessions is we usually end the coaching weekends or the summits or retreats with this time so that we can just kind of cover as many topics as possible. We don't usually go to do a deep dive in these, but you can imagine why. But as we cover these topics, I've been thinking through, okay, what are the most asked for topics to discuss? And it's really simple. These two rise to the top. We've also dealt with sexual revolution and human sexuality and those kind of things. That's right up there. I'll put that at number 3. And but we've dealt with that before too. And spiritual disciplines. There's so many that we do. But lately, for sure, these two questions have been asked, and so I want to cover them. And you'll see that the second one fits perfectly with where we've been at in the podcast in the last few weeks. Okay, so. Hey, question number 1 for this week. How do we do effective youth services? How do we do effective youth services? Or what is an effective youth service? Well, I guess if we're going to answer that question, we're assuming that you do youth services, because I know there are different philosophies and different settings. You know, I have that opportunity to be in a small, medium, and large church setting every week, every month. I have the opportunity to be in the urban, the suburban, and the rural setting every month. So I get to see different philosophies and models of youth ministry. And to be honest, that is it's a blessing, and it can be challenging at times too, because I get to see healthy and unhealthy youth ministry. But what I've found is that most people are doing a youth service. Well, the second question will kind of deal with that a little bit too, but let me deal with the key elements for a successful youth service, okay? So I'm going to give you 6 of these, okay? Number 1, relationship. Every effective youth rally, youth service has effective relationships. I mean, think about this. Our students are in a tech age. They are really the first digital natives. You know, the millennials most of the millennials grew up with that too, depending where you put their age range, 1980 to 98 or whatever, right? But if you look at the Gen Z today, 1998, 1999 to 2013, those 15, 16-year-old, the teenagers today, they are for sure, without a doubt, the first digital natives. And what that can cause is a disengagement and a disconnect. And so what I really believe that we need to do in youth ministry is to make sure that relationship at every level of the youth ministry is solid. The second thing for an effective youth service is worship. And what I mean by this is a response to presence. a response to his presence. What are our youth services if we are not allowing students time to respond to God? This is critical because in so many settings that worship is not done. And I don't just mean music. What about fine arts? What about all the fine arts and the gifts and the skill sets and the talents that the students have? Spoken word, poetry, art, drama. There are so many different settings that students can be used in to bring about worship. But hear me, we can't be gathering as a youth ministry and not having worship. That's critical. As a matter of fact, I don't believe we even need to teach our kids how to worship. I think we need to teach our kids how to worship God. They already worship, right, themselves and icons and their bae and their bestie. They know how to worship. What we have to do is to teach them how to worship God. Okay, all right. So number 1 was relationship. Number 2 is worship. And number 3 is theology. You know, if you look at the stats that 33% of teenagers in our churches can only name half of the 10 commandments, we have a problem. Especially that 4% of Gen Z in America, all Gen Z, have a Christian worldview. Both of those stats are from Barna in their recent February 2018 study. And one of the things that we're learning is that theology over the last 2 decades has gone down, and from really, if you go back to 3 or 4 decades, from Gen X to to millennials and now to Gen Z, the theology, the worldview has shrunk in every generation, and so that it's 4% in Gen Z today. So theology is a critical part of an effective youth ministry. Number 4, prayer. Wow. I'm going to put the spiritual disciplines in here. I said to all of our students, and many of you have heard me say this, as a youth leader, if my students leave the youth ministry after 1 year or 2 years, or if they've been in youth ministry from middle school through high school, if they leave the youth ministry and they do not know how to pray, they do not know how to read their Bible, they do not know how to share their faith or fast, if they don't understand the spiritual disciplines, I've failed them. I mean, what are we doing in youth ministry, right? So critical to an effective youth service is prayer, allowing not just leaders praying over students, but teaching students how to pray and respond to the presence of God. Number 5. So number 1 was relationship. 2 is worship. Theology is number 3. Prayer and the spiritual disciplines are number 4. And number 5 is creativity, or bumpers and walk-up videos. How easy today. You can go to Vimeo, YouTube, Right Now Media. There are so many different places for you to find creative videos. And to be honest, just ask your students. Your students could create walk-ups, or they could create trailers for your messaging, right? So many of them could just walk right into this. It would be easy for them, okay? And so those 6 things, look for those kind of things, okay, in an effective youth service. Okay, let me cover question number 2. And that goes along with what we dealt with last week in a presence-based youth ministry. And so number 2 is, the number 2 question is, what is the balance between the spiritual and the natural, you know, the play and the pray, games and, you know, that kind of thing, creativity in youth ministry and small groups and breaking that up? Is there a balance there, and what does that look like? Okay? So last week we dealt with a presence-based youth ministry, and we defined that. And what we mean by that is really simple. Whether you have programs and games and all of the other stuff, does it allow for the presence of God? Because if all of our programming, whatever you do in your programming, if all of that does not allow for response, and it doesn't allow for presence, then why are we doing it? See, the church is not just a parachurch organization. The church is not just YMCA. We're not the Salvation Army or Big Brothers, Big Sisters, okay? The Church of Jesus Christ is supernatural. And if all we're doing is programming and all we're doing is putting together presentation, but we never get to presence, then we're missing a major part of Christianity. You know that our students are supernatural. They are drawn to the supernatural. Right now, there are no less than 33 movies out on the supernatural, movies and television shows. Our students, it's one of the traits of millennial and Gen Z, of the millennial and the Gen Z set. So we can't miss out on that. So let me give you some ideas for the balance in programming and presence by asking you 3 questions here. Question number 1. What good are our programs if they do not develop theology? Okay? What good are our programs? Whatever you decide are your programs, okay? What good are our programs if they do not develop theology in our teenagers? And if you look at the last 2 decades, you would have to say that this rise in programming in youth ministry is not working. Listen, I know that we can blame the family, and the family has its part. It's central to all of this is the family. No question about it. But the church has a responsibility too. And if all we do is programming, then we are missing a critical element of successful youth ministry. So, number 1, in your programming, okay, if you slide toward programming, is it developing theology? Number 2, is your programming developing response? Okay? Whether that's worship or whether that's prayer or whether that's conversation that's going back and forth. Because I know what happens in most youth ministries. Small groups are not healthy. I know I get kickback and I can sense the tension in the room, okay? I'm okay with the temperature rising. Because oftentimes what happens is we say that we're doing a small group based ministry because we want to teach kids theology and whatever, and right? But we know what's happening? We have leaders who are talking 80 and 90% of the time. I'm in these, I watch these settings all the time. And I do effective youth ministry small group training. And oftentimes leaders will say, man, I've never talked about that with our leaders. So if the leader's talking 80 to 90% of the time and the students are talking 10 to 20% of the time, that's not effective small groups, right? And another part of this, question number 2, is if my small groups are not creating a response, then what that looks like is I don't have worship in my small groups. I don't have presence in my small groups. Because I know some of you will go back to this whole area of presence and say, listen, programming can be presence. I agree 100%, but it doesn't always happen. Be honest with ourselves. It does not always happen. I've been in those settings. It should, but it doesn't. And so we have to be careful with that. Let me give you the third question that with your program-based ministry. If you're doing this program-based ministry, how well have you trained your leaders? Because leadership development is more important than you think if you're going to do program. Because now, whether it's the game, or, the pre-event, the worship, the sermonette, the response at the end with the small groups, you may be ready as a youth leader. You may be knowing what's going on as the youth leader. But if your leaders don't, then, and they're not trained well in small group principles, okay, or how to meet students in the pre-event and get to know their names and ask their stories and find out what school they go to, or to say goodbye at the end instead of all leaders sitting together or standing up in the back. If we're not training our leaders in a program-based setting, then they're not connecting with the students and we're not building relationship, okay? Final question, number 4 in this area is, are our programs leading to decisions? Okay, disciples, okay, not just converts and not just fans or spectators. Because oftentimes in a program-based ministry, we evaluate ministry by how many kids came, whether they had fun, whether the game went off smooth and our flow was good, right? Listen, that is not a good assessment or measurement of a small group. What about our decisions? Are decisions being made? And go back to all of those, theology and response and worship in those settings and trained leaders, all of that, okay? I know you sense the negativity toward small groups from me. It's not. Maybe it's there because I'm so strong with the presence base, but hear me. If you're going to do it, make sure that the presence is more important than the presentation. in that setting. Okay, so hey, I hope this has been helpful. Two important questions: how to do effective youth ministry services, and this balance between program and presence-based youth ministry. Listen to last week in our series. We covered the presence-based youth ministry last week. Okay, so once again, thank you for joining us at Theology Resources. You know how to find us. Okay, you know where to find us. If you go to our social media, you can click the link tree and it'll take you to all of our formats. Okay, or just go to youthology.com. Everything's on there too. Hey, have a great week. We'll be back with another topic next week on Youthology Resources. And if you like that beat, I do. So let the beat take us out.